Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think that we are actually live now, if I see correctly. So, Excellency, colleagues, friends, good afternoon. It is a tremendous pleasure to welcome you to this session on Champion Women's Leadership in Tech. It's organized as part of the Commission of the Status of Women 65. Without further ado, I'd like to invite Ms. Pumzi Malabo Naguka, the United Nations Under-Secretary General and Executive Director of UN Women, to deliver her opening remarks. Over to you, Pumzile.
Thank you very much. Equals, partners, distinguished panelists and guests, and ladies and gentlemen, it's wonderful to see you again. We are at CSW65, and the theme for this CSW is women's leadership and participation in public life. The theme also includes a focus on violence against women, especially the type of violence that affects women who go into public office, because women who stand for office of whatever rank experience a lot of violence, physical violence, cyberbullying, intimidation by their own colleagues in their parties and their opposition. And that tends to deter women from standing for political office. And the relevance of this theme to our discussion is that it is expected that when women are in public office, they obviously are responsible for making policies, including policies that would propel women's greater participation in all sectors in society. They would also look into the financing of programs that would support women. They would lobby, they would use advocacy in order to promote and support women in all other sectors. So while CSW is looking at women in public office, women in tech have an interest, because the success there is success for all of us everywhere. People like me and Doreen, we are women in public institutions, for instance. Our responsibility is to support women everywhere through the policies we support where we are. Our focus on women's leadership in technology, on ramping up women's representation in all decision-making levels, is also critical at this time when we are building back and looking at the aftermath of the pandemic, because there also we are seeing the underrepresentation of women. The pandemic has shown us the importance of technology, and one of the greatest challenges we're facing from the pandemic is the fact that there is digital divide. With the need and demand for technology, there are many women that are going to be left behind. It is now not about the future, it is about the now. Something has to happen now in order to make sure that we facilitate greater participation of women in the tech sector. We have noted that in the United States, half of all tech startups do not have women at their leadership teams, for instance, that only 24% of available senior vice president positions are occupied by women. We know that in Africa, women are also underrepresented, estimated to be only 10% of women in startups. So the list goes on. Our challenge is to facilitate the entry of women at all levels, at entry level, at mid level, at the top level, but also in all aspects of tech, programming, software development, policymakers, users, content developers. And that should also assist in job creation. But the point I would like to make and leave with you as an urgent point is what is going to happen to women who have lost jobs in droves from the pandemic. Because 2/3 of the jobs that have been lost in the pandemic have been lost by women. Women are disproportionately affected by this pandemic. And to the extent that future jobs will require some digital competencies, which many women do not have, how are we going to facilitate this transition? What actions can we take in order to make sure that women have not lost forever? They have not dropped out into the labor market and are staying at home and are not ready and in any way fit for purpose for the jobs of the future. I think this is something that we need to address. And most of the women who are affected are women between the ages 24 and 35 because of having young children and therefore needing to look after their children. And these are young women, they still have a long life ahead of them. So I put it to us as equals that this is a task that is waiting on us. And I also want to give a shout out to signatories of the Women's Economic Empowerment Principles and look at how through the commitments that they make in the Women's Empowerment Principles, they can pull together and devise a strategy for us to have a systematic way of addressing this big gap that has been added as a result of the pandemic. Thank you.
Those are excellent comments. Thank you so much. And I know that in the course of the panel, I'm sure that we'll be addressing many of these topics, including the disproportionate effect on women during the pandemic, which is very close to all of our hearts. Now it's my pleasure to invite Ms. Dorothy Ntembo, the Deputy Executive Director of the International Trade Center, for her opening remarks. Thank you, Dorothy. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Fellow ECOS partners, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning, good afternoon, depending on which part of the world you are joining us from. It is my pleasure to be here this afternoon from my side and to welcome you all to this joint event that we have put together for this afternoon. And the emphasis and the focus of our discussion this afternoon is very much one that is focused on championing women's leadership in tech. This discussion is one, to me, that is very timely, and very important for each one of us, for it is one that will enable us to see clearly what part we can play to ensure that women are equally represented among leadership positions in the technology sector. Like many of you, last Monday on International Women's Day, I celebrated women's contribution to the economy and society. It was time for reflection. And in my reflection, I could clearly see how much has been achieved up to this point. I think a lot of work, a lot of good work has been done. But it is also very clear to me that there is still a lot of work that needs to be done going forward, particularly pertaining to women in tech. On one hand, we can see women are increasingly rising through the ranks in public and political life, from the election of Finland's female Prime Minister, Sanna Marin, to Ursula von der Leyen, the first female president of the European Commission, and most recently, we have the first Vice President, Kamala Harris of the United States. We have also seen a lot of other examples in different parts of the world that show that we are moving in the right direction. Yet, on the other hand, within the rapidly growing technology sector, women leaders are not as visible and are highly underrepresented. A recent report from the US-based law firm reveals that women hold only 11% of executive positions at the Silicon Valley companies. Women are not only underrepresented in positions of leadership across the tech sector, Data from a recent global gender gap report reveals that women account for only 12% of those involved in cloud computing, 15% of engineers, and just 26% within data and artificial intelligence sector. Understanding these gaps and what specific actions are needed is critical to us ensuring that more women reach executive level positions. This is important for three main reasons. First, it is important to ensure that women and men contribute equally in shaping the technologies that are redefining our societies, economies, and personal life, and more so in the current context of COVID-19. The tech sector needs more female leadership to ensure that technology represents humanity's diversity in aspirations and, more importantly, in needs. Second, having women in senior leadership positions positively impacts female employee engagement and retention. In organizations where 50% or more senior leadership positions are held by women, it has been proven that they are more likely to offer equal pay, and female employees are more likely to stay with the company longer than a year and report higher job satisfaction. And finally, third, girls and young women need to have visible female role models in tech sector. As award-winning actor and gender activist Gina Davis says, if we can see it, we can be it. At the International Trade Center, we recognize the importance of supporting women in tech sector, and we do so through ITC's She Trades initiative, which works with female tech entrepreneurs across Asia and Africa to open opportunities to grow their businesses and enable the market. And we complement this with all the other work that we do within the context of the organization, which may not specifically target women, but also has women involved in those activities. We have seen firsthand that disproportionate challenges that women in tech face, including skepticism with clients and peers, difficulties in accessing finance, and social norms and expectations. However, we have also seen their untapped potential for growth and the opportunity they have to drive industry change in their countries. In Nigeria, for example, one such female tech entrepreneur started from scratch, and she is now employing over 1,000 people and opening the door to more women in the industry. In Bangladesh, one female entrepreneur that we have been working with rose to the top leadership position within an IT industry association and now works tirelessly to lift other women up and encourage girls to enter the sector. To ensure that women can more easily rise to the top levels within the tech industry, this joint panel session will examine the root causes of the persistent gender gap among leaders in the tech sector. And we'll also present new research findings from the recently published Joint ECOS report entitled Perceptions of Power Championing Female Leadership in Tech. This report highlights and examines why there are gender differences in leaders' perceptions of their leadership qualities. The session will also propose concrete actions that a range of stakeholders can undertake and are undertaking to promote leadership in women. As USG said, it's not important to talk about these things only, but it's even more important to ensure that we have accompanying action going with it. It is therefore our hope that the research insights we will hear today will inform and inspire those in a position to make a difference. Together with UN Women, as co-chair of the ECOS Leadership Coalition, ITC is pleased to see such important research undertaken in the coalition and in partnership with a wide range of stakeholders, from private sector to academic institutions to international organizations. I would like to end by congratulating the dedicated team from GSMA and Oslo Met University for their hard work in bringing this study to life, for their concrete contribution to fulfilling a critical gap in data on female leadership. And without much ado, I am very pleased to hand back the floor to you, Julie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Pranzita and Dorothy, for your very engaging and, in fact, inspiring opening remarks. ITC and UN Women are the co-leaders of the Equals Leadership Coalition, working together to bridge the gender divide in leadership and technology. I'm also very honored to join you today to discuss our unfinished business of the 21st century. The unprecedented challenges we faced during the pandemic acted as the latest catalyst for change. It highlighted the critical role technology plays in every economy and society. And with advances in AI rapidly reshaping our world, supporting the advancement of women in the digital economy leadership's ranks has never been so urgent. This is why the consortium of partners under Equals, the global partnership, including EY, GSMA, Oslo Metropolitan University, the UC Berkeley, the University of Washington, and the University of Pennsylvania, developed this unique study highlighted Perceptions of Power, Championing Female Leadership in Tech. We all know what a chronic and widespread shortage of data exists on gender-related matters. That's why evidence-based products like this one are so incredibly important in providing a huge range of different stakeholders with the information they need to take the necessary actions to improve the potential for women to take their place as leaders in the digital economy. So with no further ado, I'd like to welcome our panelists. H.E. Alicia Bonrostro Masur, Ambassador, Alternate Permanent Representative of Mexico to the United Nations. Doreen Bogdan Martin, the Director of the Telecommunication Development Bureau, ITU. Dr. Kurt Rice, Director, Oslo Metropolitan University. Mats Granard, Director General of GMSA. Silvina Moschini, the founder of SheWorks and the 2019 Equals in Tech Award winner in the leadership category. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. It's been proven that we still have a long way to go before we close the gender gap in leadership in tech. The Equals report shows that both men and women's perception around leadership really differ across three key areas. First, men appear to identify as hands-off leaders to a greater extent than women. Second, women identify as transformational leaders to a greater extent than men. And thirdly, it seems that women perceive themselves as concerned with others' abilities and desires to succeed to a greater extent than men. So let me start by asking each of our panelists about the challenges and the to-dos from their own experience and from what they've observed more generally in their industry and sector. Ambassador Bonrostro, can I ask you, what should they do to address the gender gap in leadership in the tech sector, in your opinion?
Well, thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. I would like to start first by thanking the organizers for all the work that you do for gender equality. It is work that goes well beyond CSW because we live and breathe efforts for the empowerment of women and girls every single day. And I think that this is a very timely and an example of the much needed partnerships to ensure meaningful participation of women in the public sphere. So if you ask me on the question, we think that innovation and technology provide unprecedented opportunities to break trends and reach those who are the most likely to be left behind. In this regard, we think that innovation and technology is one of the drivers of change in the digital era. And digital technologies can be powerful tools for inclusion. This means facilitating access and availability of opportunities for women, particularly those experiencing marginalization due to their age, their ethnicity, education, income, disability, location, or migratory status. So in the case of Mexico, we think it's urgent that governments and other multi-stakeholders work to bridge the digital divide between countries and persons. And that one of the core problems with rapid technological change is that it can also exacerbate inequalities in a society. If only men have access and training on digital tools, the effects on women could be devastating. So leaving women out of technology leadership deprives them and from innovation-led industry. You could leave that only for some of the best and the brightest minds. So we would like to see greater inclusion of women and girls in critical innovation sectors where they are underrepresented. Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics are key for sustainable futures. What the evidence shows us is that investment in inclusive STEM education have to begin early and that they have to be sustainable, because sustainability requires not just government efforts, but a whole of society approach where men do not seek to monopolize industries, but to partner with female colleagues on collaborate ventures. So Mexico is proud to have a feminist foreign policy. Women should achieve high ranks in the decision-making across sectors. We have been advocating at the CSW for integrating gender issues with innovation. And as you well know, the Generation Equality Forum will be convened in Mexico and in France, and it will take stock progress and identify actions to accelerate progress towards gender equality. And one of the Generation Equality Forum, one of the Generation Equality actions will be technology and innovation for gender equality, and Mexico invites all of you to contribute to this. So I hope that with this, I have already answered the question, even though it was a little bit longer, but I just hope that it was fine with you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I think it was not only fine, I think you can be incredibly proud of what Mexico has achieved. And I very much appreciate your comment on the whole of society approach. Doreen, would you mind if I came to you? As one of our greatest female role models in the tech sector yourself, could I ask you, how do we ensure that girls develop an interest in pursuing careers in STEM?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. And it is great to be here with our partners, our Equals partners, EY, OsloNet, and of course our Equals co-founders, UN Women, ITC, and GSMA. So how do we ensure that girls develop an interest? I think we know that encouraging girls around the world to pursue careers in STEM is one important way to help bridge the digital gender divide and to create the leaders of tomorrow. There has been a lot of effort in this area in certain regions. We're seeing some results in Europe as well as in the Middle East, where countries have been particularly proactive, I would say. Just last week, we launched a new report in partnership with UN Women, and that report indicated that women now comprise over 40% of university graduates in STEM-related fields in European countries. So I think that's encouraging. Now we need to make sure that they get into the tech sector and of course stay in the tech sector, which is another challenge. But I think we could move faster. Evidence indicates that we could move faster by integrating digital and STEM skills earlier in children's education. So including hands-on experiences in technologies. And of course, with digital now such an important part of our world, thanks to COVID, these skills need to move into the core of the education curriculum worldwide. This is something that we've been advocating in our International Girls and ICT Day, held on the fourth Thursday of the fourth month. This year, our Girls and ICT Day will celebrate its 10-year anniversary. We've had 170 countries engaged in this effort, civil society, academia, as well as the private sector. And this specific day was created to promote the exciting opportunities in the tech sector to school-age girls. So every year we gather, we do hackathons, workshops on coding, robotics, mobile applications. And what we're trying to do this year is not just have it be a one-day celebration, but a year-long celebration. And we'll be celebrating with 10 specific moments throughout the year. But of course, Girls and ICT is just one of our many activities. The Equals Global Partnership, that's now in its 6th year, hard to believe, of existence, that we co-founded with, as I said, ITC, GSMA, and UN University, and of course, UN Women. And we have 100 partners from around the world. And Phumzile has always challenged us to take our work beyond the conversation and really bring it on the ground. And that's really what we're trying to do with Equals. With our skills coalition, including with you, Julie, with EY, with GSMA, we're running training programs for young women on gender and ICTs in 5 target countries. So we're starting with Ethiopia, Jamaica, Kenya, Nepal, and the Philippines. And we're also actively engaged in projects to help young women boost their digital entrepreneurship skills, working with EIF in Haiti, Burundi, Ethiopia. And we have a number of new mentoring programs, which is a critical component in getting more women and girls engaged. So we're looking to build the next generation of women in the cybersecurity space. We're running our Girls Can Code workshops. We've been doing this with UN Women in Africa. We're also doing it in the Americas, and we're beginning to, I think, get some traction and see some great stories coming from those girls that have taken those coding programs. And we're also supporting young women to become digital change makers through our ITU Innovation Challenges. And that's really about fostering creativity to enable young women to really turn their ideas into real world solutions. So really lots happening, Julie, lots of ways to ensure how we can get girls into STEM. I think the important thing is that now the momentum is there. And so we need to continue to build on it and really to scale it sustainably. Thank you.
Doreen, I loved your comments, and I like the idea of starting earlier and going faster. I think that's really how we build momentum. And I have to say, your university statistic with the 40% is actually quite amazing. It does reflect the progress and the momentum we have. And just building on that, I'd like to turn to you, Dr. Rice, and ask you, to what extent do you believe that the current school and university curriculum really reflect the needs of the future labor market? So they're getting into the university. Are we getting them into the labor market? What do you think?
Thanks so much for the opportunity to be here and to share a few comments with the distinguished panelists and everyone who's joining us. I think you're asking a very interesting question here about the relationship between really the structure of higher education and ultimately our possibilities for getting more girls and women into tech fields. You know, here at Oslo Met, in my time as president here, I've noticed that, especially the last year, that we're incredibly reliant on the on-campus model of education. Traditional universities and colleges, including Oslo Met, we have trouble separating the idea of lifelong education from our reliance on campuses. And we instead have built a model that kind of front loads education in early adulthood, and then in the hope that it will be relevant for the workplace. But I think that we need to think about how to distinguish things like the campus experience from the educational experience. And we need to think about doing that together with the future employers of our students. So perhaps we should consider in the tech fields also adopting approaches that, for example, at Oslo Met, we see in health science fields. When we educate young people to become nurses, for example, they're constantly moving back and forth between actual work and industry settings and the university. Whereas in tech fields, we keep them on campus for the duration of their education and then send them out into the workplace. And I think that we might find ways to achieve a greater integration between exactly the future employers and the approach that we have to education. Now, I do have to say that in addition to sending young women in tech out into industry, I would like to hang on to some of them myself. I'd like to keep them in pursuing a master's degree and a PhD, and perhaps choosing to make the university their workplace. And this is extremely important in the context of today's discussion as well, because the role of role models is well documented, is evidence-based, and we know that for young women to feel at home in faculties of technology and engineering, they need to see faculty members who they identify with. In fact, we maybe need to be talking about those educational offerings in different ways too. Maybe we need to focus not just on what you do as a student, what you do to create a certain program or a certain product, but what the role of that item you're creating will have in society, what kind of impact it will have on individual lives. Because we have seen that instead of having a course like Bridge Building 101, if we have a course like how to get people from one side of the river to the other, that it appeals to a different group of individuals, and maybe making explicit the role in society of the work one is going to do appeals differently to young men and young women. So I think that there's quite a bit of shaking up of higher education that can be done, both with respect to some structural issues, but also with respect to the relationship to the future employers of our students. So I'll let that be my opening comments here, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share them with you.
Thank you, Dr. Rice. And I think the point that you made around the importance of lifelong learning, it's not only something we need to address in young adulthood, but all throughout our lives, gives me hope that there's future second and third career opportunities out there that we should be looking to pursue. So I really appreciate that point. Now, Mats, could I come to you? I know despite the recent attention being paid to closing the gender gap in leadership in the tech sector, I have to say that women continue to be vastly underrepresented. Can I ask you why you think that is?
Yeah, that is true, and it's very sad. And I am still baffled by it, honestly. But thank you, Julian. It's great to be here among these distinguished panelists. And maybe we should start with saying the obvious, that the pandemic has certainly put extra pressure on all of us, from working from home, not seeing our colleagues, to uncertainty around business models, and changed priorities. And we know that progress on gender equality is unfortunately going in the wrong direction as a result of this pandemic. But I have maybe 4 different observations or challenges, maybe I would say. The first one is that this is a lack of multifaceted solutions. And what do I mean with that? Well, I have during this past year, during 2020 and bits of 2021, hosted a number of closed-door sessions, discussions with CEOs on driving sustainable female leadership as part of GSMA, but also as part of the B team. And I am actually quite shocked to learn from the 2020 State of Women in Tech and Startups survey that 70% of women working in tech feel that they have been treated differently at work owing to their gender, while only roughly 11% of men in tech feel the same way. So if that statistic is true, it is not just about having a wider talent pool of individuals, that would certainly help, that are focusing on STEM, but also to make sure that we need to change the existing work culture and the existing companies to ensure that women leadership can be promoted and that we all can thrive. So that's the first one. The second one is a lack of diverse workforce. And now let me give you another quite surprising statistic is that in 2019, it was just 29% of women that held senior roles. And today it's just shy of 8% or so of the Fortune 500 companies CEOs that are women. And only 3 out of 39 female CEOs are women of color. So we often forget that women from different ethnic and socio-economic backgrounds face different challenges because of their identities. Now, this is truly a major pain point for the industry, and it certainly exacerbates the divisions that we see today. Thirdly, is the speed of change, and here, I would like to go back to my dear friend Prumsilla and the UN Women Empowerment Principles, WEP, where I think today we have some 4,628 to be exact companies that have signed up. Now, out of this, unfortunately, there's only 102 representatives from the tech sector, which translates to what, 2% or so? And that is clearly not good enough, clearly not good enough. And making sure that gender is balanced and diversity is in place is not only a moral imperative, but also it is an incredible business opportunity. Realizing this opportunity calls for purpose-driven and principle-led leadership from the top. I mean, we can no longer, as an industry, as a tech industry, and I've said this many years now, we can no longer seek top talents from merely 50% of the talent, but we need to look at 100% for us to survive as an industry. And this is truly a missed opportunity if we don't act swiftly. It is a business opportunity alongside the moral imperative. So that was number 3. Number 4 then comes from what I started to say around COVID-19, which has certainly sort of disrupted the whole thing. And a report from McKinsey in 2020, and I think it was called Women in the Workplace, it tells us that women particularly have been negatively impacted by the pandemic, and it has sort of intensified the challenges that parents, and specifically women, already are facing. Being busy at work or at home working during the day, followed by taking care of the house or children at night or in the evening, without having that support, the school or childcare being there. It's been disrupted during COVID-19. Now, that is a fact, but the report points out that a result of that dynamic is that more than 1 in 4, and this is really scary, 1 in 4 of women are thinking about the going sort of back to downshift in their careers or even leaving the workforce completely. Now, that would be a horrible loss of women leadership and future women leaders, and unwinding years of painstaking progress towards gender diversity. Now, this is something I feel that we all have a great responsibility to prevent. So I think I'll stop there and come back a little bit later.
Thank you, Matt. I think those are some fantastic points that you raise. And I can only highlight, I've read that same study, and I think the loss of leadership that we would have as a result of the pandemic is just amazing, but also the pain that's carried by those women working an additional X factor of hours every day as a result of this is something we have to take into account. I very much enjoyed your concepts around purpose-driven and principle-led leadership to really come up with a multifaceted solution to improve the diversity of the workforce. So I think that's something we should hold on to into this panel discussion as to things to do. Silvina, I do want to come to you though. You are an amazing woman entrepreneur in technology, and you have helped thousands of women around the world connect with employers through your platform each and every day. Could I ask you to share with us some of the main barriers or challenges that you might have experienced when becoming a women leader in technology as you are today?
Thanks, Julie, and thanks everyone. I'm truly honored to represent women entrepreneurs in this distinguished panel. And also it's a warm reminder that 4 years ago, I launched She Works at the New York event of the United Nations, back in time when we used to travel. Back then, remote work was not even as mainstream in our wildest dream as it is now. And I do believe that also opportunities, the opportunities that crises like the pandemic bring us, can open up many game-changing opportunities for women. At She Works, I founded a company a long time ago when remote work was not even mainstream or a common thing, hoping that using technology will help us to connect the dots between the talent that women have and the opportunities that were everywhere, but not necessarily where the women were living. And it was quite challenging for me as a woman entrepreneur to raise funds for that. So one of the things that I faced was the reality that we have our internal barriers related to what we can do and how big we can go. We have the cultural barriers on what people think we are able to do and what we want to do. So I did something that I found it was a game changer for me as an entrepreneur. I skirted the rules. I raised money differently than traditional fundraising models that entrepreneurs follow. Instead of going to the VC ecosystem that invests 0.4% of the total funds in Latinx founders and only 2% of the total funding in women founders, I launched a global private offering, and I appealed to people using Regulation D and Regulation D from the Jobs Act to raise almost $50 million and turn my company into a unicorn, $1 billion company, focused on connecting the dots between talented professional women from around the world, education, and job opportunities that can be done remotely. So, Julie, the most important thing that I did, and I'm trying to give back to other women entrepreneurs, is I challenged myself to skirt the rules, not break them, just bend them a little bit, think creatively, and appeal to people like yourself who supported me with EY early on when we launched She Works, like Doreen, with whom I have the pleasure to meet when we were selected the leadership initiative at Equals in Tech 2 years ago, and with all the amazing work that women and men like yourself are doing to elevate other women so we can give it back and create a circle of purpose to support other entrepreneurs and to get more women in technology, even though, as in my case, are not developers or programmers. I founded a technology company understanding that what we women need to have is leadership, embrace our strengths and not being afraid of being powerful, because power used with purpose, it's a very beautiful thing.
That's an amazing story. And Savina, I have to say, you are incredibly inspiring, a trailblazer indeed for all of the women on this call. And so sharing your thoughts and your perspectives of how to challenge is really motivating for many. Now, I think our panelists have brought some great thoughts to the table on the importance of a whole of society approach enhanced by government policy around the importance of lifelong learning and the development of role models, the need for us to go earlier and faster across STEM and getting young girls involved, and then the importance of really purposeful leadership, principle-based change the shape and the look of the workforce in enhancing that diversity. And then last but not least, the need for us to challenge the current norms, to be innovative and to push that border. I do know there is no silver bullet to resolve these challenges. It's going to require us to do collective action to make real progress. And that's why I'd like to move into discussing with all of you some of the possible measures, opportunities, and innovative approaches we can collectively work on to really bridge this gender leadership divide in the digital sector. I think we can all agree that governments play an equally critical role in this area. Now, Mexico is hosting the upcoming Generation Equality Forum. And with this in mind, I'd like to ask Ambassador Buenrostro what her message is to the international community to really address the important issue of women leadership in tech. Ambassador?
Thank you, Julie. Well, that is a very timely question. The Generation Equality Forum, we see the Generation Equality Forum as a very important platform really to try to trigger actions that have not been yet fulfilled. And especially when it comes to tech, that is a very important one. And as I said, one of the main dialogues that we will have over there has to do with science and technology. And the messages that that we would be encouraging, of course, is that in order to have more women working and being driving forces in technology and innovation has to do with, of course, government institutions and public policies, but as well with universities and the academic side as well, which is very important in society. And when it comes to education, back again, we need to do our homework in terms of trying to incentivize girls since they are little girls about the importance of STEM. Another thing that I heard and which is very important, that is something that we should reinforce as well, is what Mr. Matt Granit has said about, that education is an ongoing thing, that it's a tool that we have to have in our hands of our whole life. So it doesn't stop in university and it doesn't stop with a master or with a PhD. As long as we are living here, we're supposed to be adapting to the world and trying to do much more. I think that the ideas that have been also being raised here about having second chances and third chances, probably you studied and you are a diplomat as I am, and I have been for 30 years, for example. But let's say that in 5 years or in 10 years, I decide to do something else, and that I know that there is margin for me and that there is enough space. So I think it also has to do with the confidence that and the trust that we put into girls and women from all ages. And this means, again, that we should be working together, everybody. And this means government and its business and the private sector. And again, it's education and schools. And we should go, where I think it's important as well, is that we have an opportunity to start with little girls, but also tackle, all levels as well. So those type of messages are the ones that we would be pushing forward at the Generation Equality Forum. We look forward to seeing you there. Ms. Pomsile will be there, and we are looking forward to see the Generation Equality Forum becoming really a triggering machine, in terms of fulfilling many actions that are still pending, and that would be very important for women. I would just like to finish with something which I listened among yourselves. The potential of business women leaders is unbelievable, is amazing, but we have the responsibility to trigger that and to be on top of that. So I would limit myself into these comments, and then we'll come back. Thank you.
Ambassador, I loved your comments. I particularly appreciate this lifelong learning, but also a lifelong career that allows us to step in and out at different phases. And I think that's especially important for women talent. I can say myself, having 4 children, it's important to realize sometimes you go fast on your career, sometimes you go slow, but you don't have to leave it entirely. It should be something that accompanies you throughout your life. And I think if we can embrace this, I think we'll go very far. And I agree with you. All of us play a critical role. Governments play a crucial role from making sure that policymaker takes into account the women's needs into the sector, to acknowledging and encouraging that leadership that you mentioned, that leadership both in mentorship and training programs. And I agree with you, working together, it's the key to shaping and implementing effective policies that recognize such of the issues. For example, things like unconscious bias.
Exactly.
Fantastic comments.
Can I come back again only for a second?
Yes, please.
I think it's very important, the confidence that we can really print into women. Because of cultural and social and economic differences and cultural backgrounds, whatever you like to call it, I think that it's important that women have the confidence to know that they can have in their lives everything they want to achieve. But probably that they cannot have everything at a certain point. It has to go through stages, but that this is an ongoing thing. So it doesn't matter whether they pay attention to the children when they are little boys and girls and so on, and they start slowly, because then they can accelerate and so on. But the important thing is that they know and that they can trust themselves, that they can keep on growing, and that their lives, are not ended professionally when they are 45. you know, so that sort of message I would love also to imprint at the Generation Equality Forum. Thank you.
Ambassador, I think that's such a valuable comment. And I mention often to the women that I meet across the world, your career is probably 50, 60 years. To stay home for 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. This is your choice and not something that society should impose on you. So I think excellent comments. I think this discussion around the power of leveraging policy and government and programs and giving that confidence into women really leads very neatly into the next point. And that's the importance of multi-stakeholder collaboration. Doreen, I know that you've been at the forefront of this, really leading on multi-stakeholder collaboration as part of Equals, but also what you do as part of ITU. Could I ask you your views on what extent can public-private partnerships such as Equals, the Global Partnership for Digital Gender Equality, how can they help address this gender gap in leadership?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Julie. I mean, maybe just to add something, of course, it's hard to have any conversation these days without thinking about the sort of COVID factor. And of course, Mats was talking about the loss of women in the workforce and Phumzile as well, and that ultimately would mean the loss of women leaders. I think it's also important to recognize, of course, the loss of education for girls in particular, and how we're hearing so many of these girls are not going to end up going back when their schools reopen. So that's a big concern that I just wanted to put out there, because I think it does put the urgency that now that Phumzile was talking about before in our work and in our attempts to really try to close the gender divide. So I think, you know, there's no single or quick fix, as we all know, to close the gender divide. It is really about all of us working together. It's all of us bringing our respective strengths and perspectives to the table. And it's only going to happen through public-private partnerships. I think or multi-stakeholder partnerships. I think they're absolutely critical. Last week on International Women's Day, under the theme of leadership, I think it helped us on the tech side put the spotlight on the fact that the digital sector is still lagging well behind, I would say, other sectors that are offering opportunities to women. And we were going over the figures with my team, and it was abundantly clear that the dial on women's leadership just isn't moving fast enough. We did find that the number of women leading ICT regulatory bodies has doubled in the past 5 years. So you might say good progress. Well, not really, unfortunately, because yes, it doubled, but that means that today women hold 13% of top regulatory jobs, and it's actually the same percentage of female ICT ministers. So that's not a good baseline for us today. We need to do more. And of course, Mats and Dorothy highlighted some of the figures from the private sector, and they're not much better, with women still being outnumbered in the sector by 3 to 1, women getting paid less, women being stuck in junior roles. And when you look at the top 5 US tech companies, women still comprise less than a quarter of the professional workforce. So we have lots to do. I think government policies, and the ambassador highlighted what's happening in Mexico. Government policies promoting inclusion can play a big role in redressing some of these imbalances. The private sector can play a big role. Signing onto the WEPs, as Mats mentioned, is a good step. I encourage companies to do that. The private sector can be fostering leadership opportunities, helping to build that pipeline, helping to equip women for senior roles, and also helping to build a sort of culture where women can thrive. So tapping in terms of the unconscious bias that may exist, adapting organizational structures to really make for a professional environment where women can actually thrive. I think if we can reach a threshold where women are sufficiently visible, the problem will start to solve itself. But right now, we're lacking those role models. We need more of them to really open up the minds of others to new possibilities. We need to get more women to the top so that we kind of create this virtuous circle, and that female leaders can then inspire the next generation. And of course, our digital ecosystem, I would say, is kind of complex. It's a sort of complex web of interdependencies. And that really means that affecting meaningful change means that we all need to work together in concert with the many different actors that make up the digital landscape. And that's why I think partnerships like Equals are so important. And of course, Dorothy and Julie, you've mentioned our Perceptions of Power report, which was a collaborative multi-stakeholder partnership effort. And it was a great example to really put the spotlight on the gap and disseminate information on how we can really correct that. I think we can celebrate some positive change, but we really need to step up in the areas that where we're really falling behind, so that we can encourage a change culture that's ready and confident to embrace new models, new ways of doing things, and also to promote a more balanced, equitable environment that really works for everyone. Thank you.
Doreen, those are terrific comments, and I like the circle around what you've described around actually combining with the ambassador said with yours around giving confidence, showing the role model, and creating that virtual circle of leadership. I do understand that Phumzile would like to add something. I know she's raised her hand, and so if it's possible, could I bring her in to these comments and discussions? Phumzile, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I'm going to be rushing to another side event, but I just wanted to agree with Doreen on the importance of having a strategy to save the girls who are dropping out of school. This is something we really cannot afford. The projection is that about 7 million girls are going to be lost to education, never to go back. This is a setback considering how hard we've worked for girls' education, and there must be a way in which technology can play a role in saving those children. In generation equality, we have a lot of emphasis on young people, on the adolescent girl, and this is the task for generation equality to really engage in and make sure that these girls are not lost forever to education. Thank you.
Your comments are so important. It's really emphasizing the urgency we should all feel on the back of this pandemic and what all of us can contribute, whether it's that those young girls or getting older women involved. We need to find a way to address this issue and to put a little bit more action in what we're doing. And as Doreen said, we've made some progress, but we definitely can't sit on our laurels, and the pandemic is really pushing us to the next stage. I do know that you've mentioned the schooling issue and getting young folks back in. I think there's even a role to play for wider academia. And Dr. Rice, if I could, I would come to you. COVID-19 has really disrupted the way we work, the way we live, the way we study. What do you think academia could do differently to contribute to closing that gender gap in tech? And how do you think we should go about that?
Those are big questions, Julie, and I have thought about these issues some, and it's exciting to try to remember that also during the pandemic, we've had experiences and learned lessons that can help us grow as we emerge from it. One of the most important things that we do in academia, of course, is not just education, but also research. And we will need a lot of research on the experiences that society has had during this pandemic. And that's our responsibility. In addition to my work as president of Oslo Met, I also lead something called Norway's Committee on Gender Balance and Diversity in Research. And part of our mission in that committee is to stimulate research organizations to engage in research about the workplace, about gender issues in the workplace, about gender perspectives on leadership, and much, much more. I did share the link to that committee's resources in the chat if anybody's interested. So we're going to offer research-based results, evidence-based results about the impact of the pandemic on men and women, on their career development, on their changes in their effectivity, not least of all with respect to leadership styles. In academia, one of the things we saw very early on is that if we measure productivity by submission of research articles to scholarly journals, it took only a few months for women to almost disappear. So what happened is a few months into the pandemic, editors from journals started noticing and reporting, and eventually this was also the subject of research, on as I said, the disappearance of women from those who were submitting their research results to academic journals. It's not hard to understand that. Schools were closed, parents were being asked to take care of their children at home. And one of the things that all of us who engage in gender equality work know is that there's a very close relationship between gender equality at home and gender equality at work. And this pandemic has made that extremely clear. Just today here in Oslo, the schools were closed again. We have a third wave of the pandemic that we don't have under control, and it's almost a total lockdown here. And I know what that means for children. I'm sorry to say that even in a progressive country like Norway, this year has seen violence at home in ways that we haven't previously talked about. But I also know what it means for the careers of their parents. And again, even in a relatively gender balanced country like Norway, men and women get very different roles under these circumstances. In fact, when this started to become clear to me last spring, I went out publicly and said, well, women are not, we're all supposed to work at home, but women are having a harder time doing it than men. So we're going to let them come back to their offices first when we start opening up again. And that did create some debate in Norway. And it was a proposal that young women were very eager about and old men were very not uneager about. But it's important for us to study these issues and research these issues to incorporate those lessons into the way we view the pandemic, and not least of all, to incorporate into our educational programs many of these lessons about how career paths are affected through the different kinds of circumstances of a life in different phases, as several people have touched in on. So I'm hoping that our role is especially about generating evidence and about bringing the consequences of that into our educational programs.
Excellent comments, Dr. Rice. And I must admit, I would be the first one to jump on the returning back to work first concept for women. I like that. It would give them a little bit of a vacation before they go back to work. And I think everyone deserves that right about now. Fantastic. Mats, could I come to you? I think Dr. Rice talked about the importance of incorporating examples and the experiences into academia and into the programs that we're doing in our schools, in our universities. Could I ask you about best practices that the private sector, and certainly not least the mobile and tech industries, could adopt to really help accelerate the closure of this gap?
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And I know there are plenty of really good practices from our members, the mobile community. And I think they all are in line with the UN. I don't know if you can see that on the SDGs here that I have on my lapel. And it sort of links to the overall industry's purpose of intelligently connecting everyone and everything to a better future. And in that context, it is critically important that we are equipped with a diverse workforce. Otherwise, it just will not fly, as I said before. So if I look then at what GSMA, what we're doing is that we, during last year, October of last year or so, we introduced a quite ambitious diversity and inclusion action plan and a language guide to make sure that we both attract but also retain talented women. And what we did was really 4 steps, and I think this is not really unique. I think this is the way to do it. And the first thing is to get data, understand where you are in your workforce. So that's number 1. Number 2 is to back to the culture, to make sure that you use that data in an intelligent way and you emphasize the culture aspect in your company. that certain things are okay, others are absolutely not okay, and you need to be quite vocal about that. And thirdly is to practice and make sure that processes are sort of aligned with the culture, if you would like, so they all play together. And the fourth one is, of course, accountability, that we do follow up and we do measure that things get done in the right way. And if it doesn't, then we go back to gather more data and try to understand where we went wrong. Now, that activity is, we gained a lot of strength from signing up to the UN Women Empowerment Principles that I spoke about before, and it gave us good guidelines and good guidance as well, and we felt that we were sort of not alone in this quest, if you would like. And we were also really encouraged last year that we won the 2020 EU G7W Peace Award for the best network category, and which I thought was pretty cool. But it was maybe even more fun or great that the jury was made up of young women that judged GSMA against 3 criteria: innovation, transformation, and impact. So that I felt was tick in the box. We're doing something right, at least, and that was an encouragement for us at GSMA and the team. The second thing is, I'm back to the report that we discussed earlier, and you know, we were part of that report, and I don't want to go through everyone that contributed, but Dr. Rice was certainly one of them, and also EY as a financial contributor, and you're going through all the other universities that were there. And it was quite interesting to see the result of it, and you know, a total of 100 leaders in the mobile and tech industry responded, with an overwhelming majority of women, 80% women, 20% men. And that is one of the problems. When you do these type of surveys, women always are outnumbering men when it comes to the answer. So that's another thing we need to correct, that it needs to be 50-50 in the surveys to get really good guidance. But the outcome of it was, as I think Dorothy said, that women identify themselves more as transformational leaders than men. It's number one. Number two, women perceive themselves as concerned with others or others' abilities and desires to succeed to a greater extent than men. And thirdly, women often perceive themselves as exhibiting more effective leadership traits than men. Now, I think these findings, you know, taking into account there was 80% women answering and only 20% men, but it's really food for thought, and it reflects, I think, on the different leadership styles. Developing leadership skills and mentoring is really critical, which brings me to my last point around mentoring, that we have together with the Women's World Wide Web launched an e-mentorship program targeting our Tech for Girls initiative, which is girls between 18 and 25 years or so. And this program aims to boost their employability by developing good networks, good skills, and a professional ambition. And we believe that mentoring, as I've said here before, is really, really critical. So if I may then just close, I think that, you know, gender equality and women's empowerment are really key to achieving the SDGs. And remember that when women thrive, societies, business, and economies thrive as well. So thank you.
Mats, thank you for that. And I appreciate your last comment, because it emphasizes that this is not something we're doing to be fair or to be nice or to be socially responsible. We're doing it for good business, because only when we do this does performance increase, our GDP increases, business results increase. It's good all around. And that's really, really great comment.
That's spot on. Exactly so, Julie.
So Silvina, talking about good business results, I need to come to you, because, you know, I would like to understand from you, as your experience as a young woman leader in tech, to reach the leadership level you've gotten to, what would you say were the specific and the concrete actions that really worked well to support you along the way in becoming such a leader? And what advice would you give us? What should we do to really accelerate progress and increase the inclusivity in tech? What's your perspective?
Well, since Julie, I'm not that young, but thank you for that. I I think that one important thing that was instrumental for me was not to be afraid. For women, as we have been since we're a little child, trained to be princesses, to look good, but not to sound too good or too assertive or too aggressive, like changing the mindset on how we see ourselves and not being afraid of being leaders, of being assertive, of dreaming big and flying high was a key. Another thing that actually what I will say is what I said in Equals in Tech Award, to actually believe that we can change the world is the first step to start changing it. So working on ourselves, because it's, you know, St. Patrick's week, so we make our own luck too. So we need to believe that we can. And the other thing is going back to Doreen's comment, we need to work together with people, build our own tribe, public-private partnership, working with innovators, working with multilaterals, working with academia, building, joining forces, because one of the things that sometimes we women fail is, instead of like trying to see how we can bring our efforts together and build a platform that is stronger, that make us bigger, that put us in a better position, we work in an isolated manner. And the strength and the difference lies in our ability to believe that we can do it, and actually our ability to build our tribe, because at the end of the day, business is a contact sport, and we need to build networks, and we need to make the contacts that we need to actually be able to thrive.
I love the business as a contact sport. We need to get out there and be confident and really just do it, Sylvina, is what you're saying. I like that very much. I'm going to come to each of our panelists for just a 1-minute close, a very quick and snappy sentence from you in terms of what do you think the most important next steps are, the most important thing we could do to bridge the gap from your perspective. And just to kick us off, I'm going to go to the ambassador, then Doreen, Dr. Rice, Mats, and now Sylvina. So if we could start off, maybe, Ambassador, could I come to you?
Sure. I think that everything has been said here. I think that all the expertise and experienced people, and we have already identified the problems, and we know exactly what we need to do. First of all, there's no other way to have quality education. I think that is a very important thing. And then I also think that this trust issue and confidence in women, that they can do whatever they want to achieve. And it doesn't matter whether they want something at this point in life, but that it can evolve into something different, and that they can continue to have some other dreams and achieve them. So I think that psychological, social part in education and in sending those messages are very important. And then it has already been said, you know, there's no way to move forward if we don't work together. We need to do this collectively, and that's why the Generation Equality Forum, you know, its idea in terms of being a multi-stakeholder in order really to shake things and mobilize. I think that is also an important thing. So I could finish there so that my colleagues can also comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. Doreen?
Thank you. My little recap, Mats, coming back to you, is that moral imperative, leadership imperative, whole of society approach, and then of course on top of it, the economic business opportunity. I thought that was a great sort of takeaway coming from this panel. So in terms of urgent actions, Julie, I would say, no surprise, partnership, partnership, partnership. Really advocating the urgency of closing the digital gender gap through equals, through generation equality. And it's also great to see, I saw in the chat, we have the W20 representatives because Italy's hosting the G20. So good to see W20 is present. And I think also other urgent steps would be measuring. Mats, you mentioned that as well. Let's get the baseline and keep measuring. Focus on the startups, the VC funding 2% issue has to be changed, and also the government policies. If we can focus on those pieces, I think we can really start to see the needle move. Thank you.
Fantastic, Doreen. Dr. Rice, could I come to you?
Thank you. Universities are about knowledge and we're about discovery. And the way that we can contribute to the issue we're discussing today is to enhance those things. How can we learn more about why the world is the way it is? How can we learn more about what could be done to make it different? And as we educate, especially young women in STEM subjects, it becomes clear to me that we need to focus not only on the content of the field they are studying, but more so, we need to increase our engagement in issues related to career choices. We need to talk about leadership. We need to talk about the kind of opportunities and responsibilities one can choose to take in along the career path and prepare them for that as well. So as we do that, I think that we'll be sending more young women into society who are even better prepared to take on these roles and to pave the way for young girls today. Thank you.
Fantastic. Mats, could I come to you?
Of course, Julie, it's that snappy 1 minute that is horrible, but the pressure is on. The future global prosperity requires women and men to be at the forefront of this digital revolution. We need to have the best, smartest minds, regardless of gender. But I would like to say one more thing, and that is that I think we're missing a simple trick, and that is with measuring. I'm being an engineer, I love measuring and taking actions accordingly. Now, if you take P&L, profit and loss, we know how to measure that in and out. We even have accounting firms that help us do it. Lately, we have done that centuries back. Now, climate, we are establishing science-based targets. We're establishing TCFD and measurements, and we can sort of gauge how well companies are performing against their commitments. And stakeholders can reward or punish companies in the same way as they do with profit and loss statements. Every quarter we do that, and every year we do the TCFD disclosure of our carbon impact. We don't have a similar thing for gender. And what is being measured gets done. And I would argue that on a global scale, we would benefit by establishing a metric that we would all measure the same way. And the companies that are doing well will be rewarded by their stakeholders, and the ones who are not, well, they will have to improve. Thank you very much, Julie.
Love it. Salvina, could I come to you? What do you think?
Thank you, Julie. Half the sky should have half the opportunities, and we need to normalize seeing successful women thrive. For that, we need to sponsor women, lift them up. We need to hire women so they can access the type of opportunities that fits into their life and they can continue into the career path to reach leadership. And we need to fund women. This is super, super important. It's up to us to use technology to change the rules of the game. We are living the perfect storm for digital transformation. And now we have no excuses to see successful women thriving and building role models so the next generation won't have to be here to explain why we need to have equal opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. And if I was going to summarize, I would probably say only 6 words: confidence, collaboration, education, measurement with a capital M for Mats, sponsorship and funding. I think those are great comments. It shows we're not going to be able to do this alone. We have to find a way to work together. And I truly believe that together we have the opportunities and the power to truly transform the world for women in the future, giving them the chance and opportunity to achieve leadership roles in tech and the mobile industries. And with this, I'd like to invite Ms. Hilda Hardeman, the head of the European Service for Foreign Policy Instruments, to bring the closing remarks for this session. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, this panel was a real call for action, for urgent action. Many are putting their shoulders under the task of championing women in tech. There are many challenges, but also many opportunities, and we need to capture these across the globe. from Zilin Mlambo emphasized it. The pandemic and the disproportionate impact it has on women makes this even more urgent now. My president, Ursula von der Leyen, is particularly attached to taking this forward. To start with, we must challenge digital gender stereotypes, help girls and women invest lifelong in digital skills, encourage them to be confident and choose for a career in tech, taking a first, second, third, fourth chance. That is key. Motivating girls and women to study ICT, facilitating their access to university, using also new models, as Dr. Kurt Rice said, doing away with misconceptions and unconscious bias is crucial. Secondly, to close the gender pay gap and gender leadership gap in the tech sector, we need to see more women entrepreneurs, more women at the top. We need to see change from within tech companies, also on work culture. And for the European Union, this is top priority. At political level, EU member states and Norway made a political commitment to raising the place of women in digital. Doreen Bogdan-Martin already mentioned it. Across the EU, we celebrate a Girls in ICT Day to raise awareness. And at company level, the European Commission forged an alliance with big tech companies to close the digital gender divide by signing a declaration of commitment with CEOs. Google, Spotify, Dell, Accenture, and many others have joined us in this undertaking, and we seek to bring many others along. Third, we need to do more to raise awareness of the opportunities there are. Events like today's are important. We need to do more of these and make them easily accessible also to young women. And following the example of Silvina Moschini, we must strengthen opportunities for girls and women for mentoring and networking, because business is a contact sport. As Dorothy Tembo underlined, we must bring in influencers and role models, showing how they moved into tech, how they managed to grow and seize opportunities, how they make an impact is important to inspire others and create a virtuous circle of leadership. Promoting tech as a force for good is part of this. Ambassador Buen Rostro said it so well. We must inspire girls to choose a career in ICT by showing the enormous opportunities this brings to help shape a sustainable future. Or, as Dr. Rice said, how it will impact on the lives of individual people. That matters to women and girls. Finally, we should address the issue of gender and diversity, as several speakers said, both when it comes to tech users and tech professionals. Greater diversity brings more creativity, more innovation, and ultimately greater profitability. Is this an uphill battle? Yes, it is. And are we going to win it? Yes, of course we will. So let's continue championing women in tech industry. Let's work together and let's be smart. We know what makes a difference to build forward better. Let's all do our part. We need to start early and go fast. Let's embrace our strength for generation equality. When women thrive, society thrives. Thank you all very much indeed.